yeah, we're live. I love when technology works. Hello, welcome to GitHub Education. My name's Pj Metz. I am the program manager, student communities at GitHub Education, and I'm so excited to be here today with all of you to talk about open source. And we're going to talk about open source in a very specific way. We're talking about open source as a way to help you gain the same things that an internship gets you. Because what does an internship get you? An internship gets you experience, helps you work in the real world. I always do this because, like, as a former teacher, I always felt weird that people were like, hey, kids, you're not in the real world. You're in the real world. It's just you're not like working, you know what I mean? But we want you to get experience. And sometimes an internship doesn't get you the right experience. Sometimes an internship doesn't show up. Sometimes you're stressed. Am I going to get this internship or not? Well, it turns out you can still get experience by working in open source. Another thing that open source does for you, or rather another thing that internships does for you, is it makes you network. It gives you connections. You meet people. You're working in open source, you'll meet people too. So I was thinking, as I saw students that I know all worried about getting internships, and if I don't get an internship, I don't get a job, and if I don't get a job, I have to live in a box. And I get it. We're all scared, we're all worried, but we're here to talk about how open source can really benefit you as a student. Hello, everyone in the chat. Takir, hi. Dev, Harsh, hello, everybody. So excited that you're all here. I'm not here to talk about this alone, by the way, because, like, what do I know about internship? My internship was at in a 9th and 10th grade classroom in Central Florida, northern Central Florida. So it wasn't about computer science at all. It was about teaching English. But I do know someone who knows open source really, really, really well. And to help me out on this stream, I am having joining me Bekah from OpenSauced. Hi, Bekah. Oh, no.
Got on mute. How's it going? Thanks for having me.
Ta-da! Bekah, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how awesome you are?
Oh, yes, sure. I will try. I'm Bekah. I also have an English background, so shout out to English majors everywhere. I am a career transitioner, so I did a boot camp, but I've been in tech for about 5 years now, and I am working at OpenSauced. We're a company that does a lot to support anybody who's an open source, whether you're a contributor, a maintainer, you're curious, you're on a team. We're here to empower you to take your open source journey to the next level, to understand that a little bit more deeply, and to help educate folks along the way.
Oh, man. And actually, what if we had tricked everyone and we're just here to talk about, like, literature and, like, poetry? Like, haha, you thought it was about tech? We are reading Mary Oliver today instead. That's an English joke. Not everyone knows who Mary Oliver is. All right. So, Bekah, you heard me in the intro. Like, really, the whole focus of this stream and the whole focus of this series, by the way, there's going to be 2 more episodes of this, is about how open source can provide a lot of the same opportunities and experience that you get from an internship. And this is something you and I kind of talked about. I think I saw you on, like, a Twitter space one time, and you were talking about open source. I was like, man, I at the time just saw a lot of students freaking out about internships. And I think I immediately messaged you. I was like, hey, you think open source can be an alternative to internships? And you were immediately on board. It's really cool to see someone who kind of gets it like that. So, like, do you think that this is viable, like, honestly?
Yeah, and I think the important thing to recognize is that open source is huge. There's a humongous ecosystem out there. And so would I start with React, that repository, as an internship? I would not. There are plenty of spaces out there that give you the contributor journey and allow you to kind of, like, grow through that, understand things. And I know as a boot camp grad, I was in a self-paced program. So I wasn't around anybody. I wasn't able to ask very many questions or to communicate with people. And so, like, there was a huge learning curve to be able to figure out, like, how do you work on a team? How do you work in GitHub? What if your repository is more than 5 files? And, like, all of those things are really important. And open source can definitely help you to learn all of those things. So then when you start in a job, that learning curve isn't as steep. Or if you go into interview, you can say, like, oh yeah, that's no problem, I've been there.
Yeah. And I think that like you're absolutely right that we're not saying, okay, go and start contributing to Kubernetes, y'all. Like this is not about like these giant open source projects. This is actually about helping you find the open source project that works for you, because it's not all the same. You're right. It's a huge ecosystem. It's like when we say internships, some people do internships at tech companies that are developer focused, and some do them at biotech companies, and some do it at not a tech company, but they're interning even as a front end engineer at a place that like the main focus isn't necessarily developers. So there's a lot of different places that you can get this kind of work. I think maybe the most important first question is, imagine I'm a student. Imagine that I'm looking to get an internship and it's not a great internship. And I'm like, okay, maybe I'm going to try this open source thing that PJ and Becca talked about. What do I even do to get started? What's my first step? Like, how do I even find something? What would you say to that person, Becca?
Yeah, so I have two pieces of advice, and we'll drop some links in the chat for you because I think that they'll be super helpful. But we have an intro course, and we've partnered up with GitHub Education, and that's live on some of their links. But the point is to like give you a gentle introduction to what open source is and to help you get your first contribution. So if you've never contributed before, no worries, you'll get a PR. And I also want to say, like, there are other ways to contribute besides creating a PR, a pull request. You can create an issue. You can help with the community. You can write a blog post about your favorite project. All of these are really great ways to explore getting started. And so I would encourage everybody to explore what the open source ecosystem, to understand about it a little before, because like there's a learning curve. There's a specific vocabulary for open source. And I know a lot of folks are like, I think I'm in way over my head. And like, it's okay. You're probably going to feel that way when you first get started. I think that's pretty normal for anybody that is in tech. At some point, you're going to feel that way. And so it's just like learning how to talk about it, how to ask questions. So I would say start with that intro course. We also have a guide. It is called the Student's Guide to Open Source with OpenSauced, I think. We'll drop that link. And we also, on our docs, I don't know if I have a link for this, but I'll make sure I put it in the chat. We started something last year called 100 Days of OSS. So we were really inspired by 100 Days of Code. And this was a way to encourage folks to like do some exploration. Like there's lots of different ways you can explore. Look at documentation, look at how people write issues, comment back on those issues. If you see somebody that's asked the same question as someone else, one of the most valuable things that you can do is say like, hey, this question has already been asked, because maintainers often get like the same question asked multiple times, and it just becomes really hard to keep up with that sort of stuff. So I would say 3 ways. Check out that intro course, check out our student's guide, and then check out our 100 days of OSS challenge.
That is fantastic. And a lot of you are probably, if you're here looking at the GitHub Education stream, we're kind of assuming a base understanding of like what GitHub is and how to use it. So we're using terms like PR, and we're going to talk about it as if you understand GitHub, because that is very much the beginning. So if you're like, I'm a first-year student and I just finished Python 2 in my spring semester and we haven't used GitHub yet, then certainly the first step is learn GitHub, come and understand it. There's tons of stuff on GitHub and on Microsoft Learn and places where it's like intro to GitHub, making sure you understand this platform where open source lives. And then, finding the project and using these open source docs can really help you as a student know where to go and know how to get involved and know what's sort of expected of you. PJ, who isn't aware of this stuff? GitHub is the first love of developers. Listen, of course, Dev, harsh, of course, we get it. But to be fair, I was barely aware of GitHub when I started learning to code too. And I think, Becca, you said you did a boot camp. Was GitHub part of your boot camp learning?
Not really. And so this was one of the challenges moving into actually having a job, because I think up to that point I had created like 3 PRs ever. And I remember we had like modules that we worked through, but there was like a built-in IDE in the boot camp. And so you just use that. And in a lot of ways, it was great because it made it easy. But at the same time, I didn't learn enough about writing good commit messages and forking and cloning and, all of this kind of terminology that you're like, what does this even mean? And I remember my first job, he was like, okay, yeah, just create a PR. And I was like, okay, I'm going to figure out how to create a PR. Because I hadn't really practiced it that much, and it just felt so foreign. And like now it's very I don't think about it. And I was helping a new contributor recently last week, and so they were even asking like, okay, like how do I fork and how do I clone? And I don't spend that much time forking a lot of repos anymore because I work
Right.
in a lot, like I maintain a lot of projects and you don't have to fork it. And so I Googled it. And so,
Yeah.
there's a lot of times that you learn these things, but you don't put it into practice and you just go back and you Google it. And so I always want to say to folks, like, ask the questions, but, explore first. Google, ask ChatGPT, ask GitHub Copilot.
Yep.
All of these things can help you find the answers that you need and move forward. But you're going to have tons of questions. You will always
Yeah.
have tons of questions if you are working as an engineer.
Yeah. And I know that when you're first getting started, these sort of little skills that you pick up in that first job, like Bekah said, oh, like just open a PR. And it's like, well, okay, I haven't had a lot of practice doing that. And I remember the first time I had to do a PR in GitHub, especially because my old job, we weren't using GitHub. We were using the other guys because I worked at the other guys. And I got to working with GitHub and I was like, okay, I don't understand all these buttons. I don't know what goes where. So it's really confusing at first. And I feel like a lot of people think, well, at an internship, I know exactly who to ask for that. So when you're doing a not-ternship, right, if you're just working in open source, who do you ask? And Bekah's already said, it's Google, it's ChatGPT. How do I make a PR? What's a good PR look like? And I guarantee there's 500 million resources out there available that have great information on that. It's about being proactive. And if Bekah and I are being honest, that's the first thing you learn working anyway, is how to find the information you need. Or you're like, I'll just ask someone who's senior. And Bekah, what does a senior developer do as soon as a junior asks them a question?
They probably tell them to Google. What have you tried? That's what I always
What
ask,
have you tried? What did Google say? Did ChatGPT give you some? That's the first thing, because a senior developer, a staff developer, someone who's higher up knows we don't know everything. And so we have to go and find the information. Life, audience, is open book. So you might as well go and find the answer somewhere. So, Bekah, I think it'd be really cool to sort of take a look into some of these resources that we're giving and sort of talk about how they work and what's going on. Would you be able to do that with us?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to mention one more thing before we move on. I have a blog post that I didn't link, but it's called You Don't Need a Mentor, You Need a Community. I think that's what it's called anyway. It's
That's
on
a
Dev.
banger title. That's really good.
But I think, like, for me, I also run a community in my spare time. And a big part of that is having that community experience, knowing that there's someone out there that you can ask. So you're not alone in this. You don't have to just be Googling or as the kids these days say, searching it up for 20 hours. There are people out there that are certainly willing to help you and are able to support you. It's not always going to be the maintainer of a project. And this is why I recommend, like, if you're new to coding, if you're an early career person, you're learning how to code, finding a community that's willing to support you can be really important, because then you always have access to that community. There's usually someone that's willing to help no matter what time zone you're in. And like, okay, I know, like, you can get really hung up on, oh, they're going to judge me or they're going to think something about me. And, the fact is that many of us want to help you move forward. And so you shouldn't be embarrassed to ask questions, especially if you've put in the work and said, like, hey, I hit this error and these are the 3 things that I've tried and now I am fresh out of ideas.
We just told everyone we should ask Jeeves. And actually, if anyone's old enough to remember Ask Jeeves, make sure to do some stretches tonight before you go to bed, because your back's probably, 40 years old like mine is. But I love the idea of, like, mentorship versus community. I just gave a talk for a open source security conference that happened a few weeks ago, and it was about getting started in security. And that's not being a developer, but one of my points was find a community and get involved, because whether it's security or ops or developers or anyone, I know that everyone in that community who's active there wants to give answers. And even if it's from a selfish reason of, I just want more people to use tabs than spaces, so I'm trying to convert people out there to doing it my way, they're going to want to help. And I've rarely seen somebody in a community truly come down on somebody who's new. Normally someone's like, I'm brand new, I don't know what's going on. Multiple people show up to help. So it can be kind of scary if you're showing up. It feels like you're walking into a party and going, I need someone to introduce me to everyone here. But it's community, it's online, you're in a Discord, you're in a Slack, you're on a forum. That's expected. That's the only way to meet people, is to stand up and say, hello, I'm here and I don't know anything, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there, like I said, there's plenty of positive people out there. Even if you have a negative interaction, there are a lot of people out there that are not going to give that same response. And, the stakes are not that high. You're keeping your eye on like, hey, there's a journey here and I need to progress. So what's going to get me progress in the fastest way possible?
Yeah. And that's really when we talk about open source and how beneficial it is for people, that progress and that ability to get better in your own time inside of a community is really what's so beneficial about it,
Yeah.
Becca, this has been what has it been, like 18 minutes, and it's already tons of great information for people. I can tell there's going to be clips and shorts of this stream out there for everyone. So you said you would walk us through some of these materials you have, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Where do you want to start?
I feel like the Student's Guide would be a great place to start. The Student's Guide to OpenSauced.
Okay.
Inside of y'all's docs, because we are here on GitHub Education after all, and largely our audience are a bunch of kiddos out there. And I say kiddos, many of you are like 24, 25, but compared to someone who's 83 years old like me, y'all are kiddos. Mm-hmm. All right, and our producer is going to bring in Becca's shared screen in 1 second, once it's available, and we're going to start talking about what we got going on here. I love it. Okay, I'm going to bring us over. Thank you so much. That's fantastic. Yes, the Student's Guide to OpenSauced. Tell us about it, Becca.
All right. I was like, I made the wrong screen bigger. So here we go. I think we're good now. Okay, so a couple of things. So I'm going to talk about OpenSauced for just a minute more so you can better understand, okay, I'm a student. What should I be doing with it? But our platform is there to help you to showcase what you're working on, help you to find new projects, and to be able to share, like, who are you and what is your open source story? And I think that's one of the biggest things for us. And like, my background again is in English. I'm all about telling the story and knowing how to tell your story. So the more that you can spotlight that, the better. The more you know how to talk about the things that you've done, the better. So we have some different features, and this kind of walks you through how can you use this to enhance your journey and make it clearer to anybody that you want to share with. So we have a bit of a getting started guide, and there you have your profile here, and it talks about your profile. So this is what my profile looked like when I created the documentation here. But it starts to be a little bit focused about you. It talks about the things that you're interested in, how folks can get a hold of you. And we have these things that are called highlights. And so highlights for me is like one of my favorite features, because you can put in a blog post you wrote, an issue you created, a pull request that you created, and you can do some storytelling about that thing. So this is actually Stop Burning Out Maintainers. This is the not my latest highlight, but there's actually some pretty good tips in there if you're getting started as a contributor, doing some of the things that we've already talked about, like, hey, searching before you go ahead and ask a question. But the point here is on your profile, there are highlights, and this helps you to tell that story. And it also shows like, hey, this is something that I'm really proud of. And so if you're moving forward and you want to share your information with somebody, if you want to say like, okay, this is a moment that I want to remember, write about it in a memorable way. And also like both for you and for anybody that comes across your profile, because that helps them to see like, oh, this is what you thought was meaningful. This is what you thought was interesting about that. So it talks a little bit more about that. We have a whole section in the guide, in the doc somewhere, that's about writing an effective highlight. So doing some of that storytelling. And then it talks a little bit more about the other things that you'll see. So there's a contributions tab on your profile that also shows your latest contributions over the last 30 days, where you have contributed to. Let's see. I don't know if I'm sharing let me just see if I'm sharing. I think that I'm just sharing that.
Just the one tab.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah,
I am.
Which is both a benefit and like a curse sometimes. I'm always like, yeah, it's just to share a single tab is great. But
I
then
know.
I'm always like, I want to show something else. And I never, this happens to me all the time.
Okay, now I've lost all of the things. We can go back to that if somebody has questions or if you want to see more. We also have these dev cards, which are super cute and a nice way to share the things that you're working on. It's just a little bit of an overview, but I don't know. It's just like kind of nice to see your face on there. So that would be like your GitHub profile. It would tell you, what does your activity level look like? How many pull requests have you created? Your contributions, and then give your bio. So it's kind of a nice way just to showcase that and to be able to share it. And then we have this section on finding your next open source project. And this is like, I got a DM, I think on Discord today, and somebody's like, where do I get started? I want to look at Go and Hugo, I think they said. And I just sent them like straight to this guide. Like, I got you. I wrote about it. But we have this explore page that helps you to dive into things a little bit more and to understand like, okay, who else is working on these projects? What do the projects look like? Because I know one of the challenges that we often face when we're looking for projects, like, where do I even start with this? And is this, I know for sure that there are people out there that have tried to contribute to a project only to realize that nobody has merged in a pull request for like the last 3 years. So it's pretty much been abandoned, And those are like, that's the learning curve. You just don't know it until you know it. So this helps you to see, it will let you know like, okay, there is a high activity level or a medium activity level. And so I can probably move forward. And I'm a huge proponent of connecting with other people. So if you want to know more about an open source project, or if you want to think like, is this a good project for me to contribute to, find other contributors and ask them about it. And I think that gives you a really good gauge of like, oh, okay, this is a good place to be. Or check out how people are talking to each other in issues and in pull requests. Because if they're kind to each other, if they're understanding, then that can be really useful to think like, okay, I feel a little bit more comfortable in here, even though I'm nervous.
Yes, absolutely.
This doc actually needs updated. So this is kind of exciting. So it says on your highlights, you can share your Dev2 blog posts. But last week, we just merged in a PR from one of our external contributors that allows you to share any blog post you've written. So you won't have the nice little pretty card for all of them. But if you've written on your personal blog, if you've written on Hashnode, Medium, any of the other spaces, you can share that information too, which I think is, I've been looking forward to that getting merged in.
This is exciting. I love seeing that, like, actually, I love that you were like, oh, this blog needs updating, because it kind of shows like the speed at which some of these projects move too, that when you get in, sometimes you'll find some information and it might be a little outdated. But the advice I want to give with all this information we're giving, Becca, it sounds like a lot of the work to get involved actually involves a lot of reading and learning and maybe a little bit of lurking at first in order to really understand the ecosystem.
I'm a huge fan of lurking. And I feel like lurkers get a bad name. It's just such a negative connotation, but I'm a lurker in so many different spaces. And I feel like I learn whether or not if it's a good space for me to be there or if I feel comfortable. And I think that's totally fine. I'm going to drop this link in the chat too. It's called Good First Issues Don't Exist. And this was written by B. Dougie. I'm going to get to a question in the chat in a second.
If you give us that link in the private chat, we can post it, because if you do it from your Twitch, we don't have you as someone who can post links right now on the GitHub chat. It gives asterisks for you.
All right, let me.
That's right. Safety first.
That's right. Okay, I had to like decrease the size of my screen to be able to find the private chat because it disappeared.
Juan found it already. Wampa found it and grabbed it. It's there. Good first issues don't exist. Thank you, Wampa, for helping. That's wonderful.
And this is exactly what you're talking about. So one of the greatest things, keeping up with docs, I am essentially the only person on my team that's working on docs, and I have some great external contributors, but things change so quickly that often we miss, oh, this needs to be updated. And so when somebody creates an issue and says like, hey, this says only dev 2 blogs, but I saw that you can do any blog. Awesome. Like that helps me so much. And it doesn't really take much coding knowledge because it's markdown. So you have to know about contributing a little bit, but you're not getting involved in the code of the project. So anything like that, I really appreciate. And so that blog post is basically like the best first issue is the one that you write for yourself. You saw a problem, you write the problem. And I find that maintainers are really grateful for those kinds of things.
Yeah, because that's someone pointing something out that is probably in a maintainer's blind spot, because oftentimes you put something out and you have to move on to so many other things. Like maintainers are busy, y'all, like especially for really popular projects. And it's important to know that as a contributor, what you're doing is helping a maintainer get something done, you know? And that is always beneficial for the project. It's always beneficial for the community. And just making an issue to say in a nice way, oh, I noticed this, should it be this? If you're wrong, they go, no, that's not quite right, but thank you for mentioning something, and they close the issue. If you're right, the issue gets opened and they make a PR out of it, and like things, it moves forward, and you're recognized as someone that helped move it forward. As long as you're not showing up and going, I opened an issue and said website broken and just made it. Like, that's not helpful. As long as you're being helpful, it's very, very much nice. And oh, thank you, DevCycle. Thank you. Oh my. Oh yes. A question from the chat.
Okay, before we get to the question,
I just like the best book in the world. It's the best book in the world. Yes, we
highly recommend. The Making and Maintenance of Open Source Software. I got this when I started at OpenSauced. Brian sent it to me. Working in Public by Nadia Egbal. I don't know if that's how you say her name, so I'm sorry if I butchered that. So good. It is so informative and helps you to understand the open source ecosystem and all of the challenges that maintainers are facing. So highly recommend.
Absolutely recommend that book. I did a book club on that with some former colleagues, and it is eye-opening, and it's also like a little scary after you read it. You're like, oh, is this all going to fall apart soon? But yeah, Nadia, absolutely legendary. Everybody in tech should be reading that book. Everybody. And I just linked the Google Books version of it. It is, if it's an open source book, you can either buy it and have a physical copy, or you can read it online for free. The question, Bekah, what stuff can we share in highlights? Is it only PRs? Can we share issues? What all can you share in a highlight on OpenSauced?
Yeah, so right now you can share blog posts, PRs, and issues. And I think on upcoming will allow you to share releases too. So the other thing is we are going to share releases as a PR because someone opened an issue and said, hey, it would be really cool if we could share our releases. And we thought, hey, why not? Like, we have the ability to be able to do that. And so if there is something that you want to see, again, that's another opportunity for an issue or a discussion. Please put it in there. We would love love to be able to share that. We're always looking for feedback. We actually have a new feature coming out that we have beta testers that are going to be able to start testing that. So very, very excited about that. And you can if you're interested, it's called Star Search, and it is like Copilot for Git history. I will drop a link in the private chat if anybody is interested in that.
Star Search. And you said that's coming soon, or that's already here, or?
It is coming very soon, but we are about to send invites to beta testers. So if folks are interested in testing it out, sign up for the wait list, share with friends. That's a good way to get in. But we're really excited to be able to share more about that. We've got some big launches coming up the week of the 20th.
Ooh, pay attention, May 20th, y'all. Get in there and get on this wait list. Becca, this is so fantastic. So this is how we're going to show off what we can do. And these highlights are a way that we get to sort of brag about the things that we've done. A good first issue doesn't exist. The best issue is the one you make yourself. How do you decide which project you even really want to work on? Like you said earlier, like you don't have to do code. So how did you decide which open source project you really wanted to work with the first time you were doing something?
That's a really good question. It's a hard one, right? Because you're kind of looking around, and I think the most common advice people say are like, if it's a product that you're using, that's a great place to contribute to. But for most of us who are just starting out, people are telling us this is what we should be using, or we don't have the advanced capabilities to be able to understand how to contribute to the code base, which can be really complicated. And so for me, it's word of mouth. Like, what projects are you working on? There are so many people in communities out there that have repositories that are out there for you just to practice with. And so that intro course will get you a pull request on our guest book repository. So that's a good place to get started. But we also have this other repository called the Pizzaverse. And the Pizzaverse is just a fun way to practice forking, cloning, creating a PR, so you can put your favorite pizza fact or pizza recipe. And I actually think that we're expanding it to just foods from your culture. What are your favorite foods from your culture? Just to give people more of an opportunity. And then you do things like work your way up, or find projects that you're interested in, or like people that you enjoy working with. So if you like the OpenSauced team, we're pretty friendly. We're always taking contributions. I know I was writing this series called 29 Days of Open Source Alternatives, and I got at least one PR, but I think a couple during that time, because I was reading through documentation and trying to run projects just to be able to talk about it. Like, oh, this documentation is outdated. So I'm going to go ahead and create an issue, and I'm going to update it. And so, again, it's one of those things. If you see something, it's a good time to contribute. We also have the first Friday of every month, I have a post on Dev, which is who's looking for open source contributors. Now, I actually don't think anybody responded last time, but normally people do respond to that. So you can see folks who are out there and who are sharing.
Yeah, and really it's gonna feel confusing at first. And I think a lot of people, when they think about getting started and contributing, everyone wants to ramp up really quickly and get to the work, but the work is often just learning and just paying attention and watching it first. It's really hard to say, oh, just go and make a contribution. And like, well, what do I do? How do I do that? What's the contributing guide say? Like, it's all learning at first, and you're going to feel like you're moving slow, but you're not. You're moving at the speed of whatever it takes you to learn. The first tech talk I ever gave was in 2020, October 2020, for a Microsoft conference called Start Dev Change for Career Changers. And it was called Confusion is the Sweat of Learning. So if you've never contributed to open source before and you're feeling confused, Yeah, good. You actually have to feel confused in order to learn something long term, because if you learn something and you're not confused, then you didn't learn, you already knew it, right? If it's just confirming something you already knew. So lean into that confusion. Be like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm still exploring, I'm still looking, I'm still trying to find things. What you got here, Becca? What's this this repository insights page that you have?
Okay, so we have two different features on OpenSauced, which are insight pages, repository insight pages, and contributor insight pages. And so I think that if you're trying to figure out where to contribute to, this is one of the ways that I try and keep track of the repositories I'm contributing to or I'm interested in contributing to. So for repository insight pages, this is a bunch of different ways that you can do that. And this is a little bit of a walkthrough for, I know somebody asked that. But you can add different repositories and then you can kind of watch them, keep track of whether or not they're places that you want to work on or repositories that you want to work on. And see, it'll show up like this. So this, I just have all of the OpenSauced ones here. You know, Hot doesn't have that much activity, but actually we probably could use some contributors there. It also shows you who all of the contributors are. So if you want to reach out to somebody who is contributing to a project, then you can take a look at all these people here, but you can also add them to a contributor insight page. It's very similar to repository insight page, except you're following the people. So repositories follow repositories, contributors follow contributors. And so then you can see, okay, this is what all of these people are working on. I can reach out to them like, oh, analog.js, who's working on that? Well, that would definitely be Brandon. I'm going to reach out to Brandon and see how he feels about this project and if this is a good place to work on. And so this is a way to keep track of it, because again, it's one of those things that can feel overwhelming. Like, what do I do? How do I find these places? Keeping track of them is super important. Is there any option to message the contributors? Right now, no. We did have a feature in the past, but we don't have a connections feature right now. So you would have to, the way that I usually do it is I look at what they have available on GitHub. So usually they have like a link to their Twitter or to an email address or something like that. So that's how I would do it. Let's see. I know checking issues, reproducing bugs. Okay, there we go. The best way to get started with a project. Reproducing bugs. Thank you if you are out there reproducing bugs.
Yeah.
It's so time consuming.
That's the hard thing is when something takes up so much time, it can almost feel like, is this worth it? Is it worth it? Yes, it is. Reproducing a bug is way worth it.
Yeah, I love it when people do that. And somebody submitted a bug on OpenSauced a couple of weeks ago, and it was in Safari, which I don't use Safari. And so I was like trying to figure it out, and my teammate Nick Taylor was trying to help me. He was like, open up DevTools. And I'm like, I don't know how to open up DevTools in Safari.
Who opens DevTools in Safari?
I didn't even have the option. Like, I had to do something in my settings to be able to reproduce it, but I did learn how to do that in Safari. But if you came along and you were like, I reproduced this, then I'm like, sweet, thank you. Thank you for saving me the time to be able to do that. So reproducing bugs is great. Checking issues is great, especially for duplicates. Because even myself, I write duplicate issues, and I always feel bad when I do it, but it can be really hard to sort through issues and say, like, because the titles might not match the way that you're thinking about the project or the bug or whatever. And so if you can do that, or, sometimes there are questions in the chat, like somebody will comment on something and say, like, I tried to run the project and I got this error. Like, even you coming in and saying, like, what have you done to try and navigate that error? Or can you give me, what machine are you running? What browser are you using? Getting people moving forward in that direction and kind of prompting them. Anything that saves maintainers time is going to be very much appreciated. And it could be also commenting in Discord, like, hey, I have a half an hour this week if anybody wants to talk about open source, or if anybody wants a walkthrough of a project, or need some help debugging. All of those things are incredibly helpful. And I want to say this, and then I'll stop talking for a second. People often think that, well, I'm just learning, I can't help anyone. But that's not true. You can always help the person who's one step behind you. And I'm a firm believer in horizontal mentorship, which means that at any stage of the journey, you can mentor people because your perspective is going to be different than other people's, and it's valuable. Sometimes just going in there and asking someone questions is what unblocks them and helps them to move forward. So everybody out there can help. Everybody can support each other. Part of it's just a mindset shift.
That ability to ask questions to move someone forward is hugely important, and you don't have to know the answer to ask somebody a question. Like if someone puts an issue up and it just says, I have this problem, and if you read that issue as someone new and you're like, okay, I don't even know how to start thinking about this problem, ask them and say, well, yeah, like Becca said, what system are you using, or what browser is this in, or like, what did you do? And can you give more information? Can you give more information is maybe the most typed response for every issue on GitHub in any project. And honestly, when I was a community manager for an open source security app, that was the first thing I did. That was really most of what I did as a community manager was go, hey, can you give us some more information? And if you can do that for a maintainer in an open source project, it frees up the team to do a bunch of other stuff, and it gives them that next step anyway. And like sometimes a person goes, oh, I actually messed up and I was in this container and I shouldn't have been in that container while I was working or whatever. But that first step, if it hasn't happened on the issue yet and there's not enough information there, you can be the person to prompt that. And even just doing that can likely catch someone's eye and they go, oh, like, you're always in there making sure that people have given enough information. That is valuable because a maintainer's value, a maintainer's time is measured like differently than regular people's, right? Like maintainers have a lot to do and get done. If you can take something off their plate, they automatically appreciate that. And that creates a network of people that you know. And that's a big part of what internships grant you is networking with people and meeting people who have experience that you can learn from.
Yeah, absolutely. So on May 1st was Maintainer Month. And so we kicked off Maintainer Month with a blog post that we'll share here too. And so I have a whole post on enhancing support for open source maintainers. And this is definitely the first in multiple series of blog posts, but I think, it gives a little bit of ideas for, okay, what are the challenges maintainers are dealing with and how can we help those things? And actually, this is a total aside, but I have 4 kids, so I'm a mom, and when I was thinking about all the challenges of being a maintainer, it's like you're responsible for so much, and like you have to navigate issues and you have to navigate people yelling at you or yelling at each other sometimes, or you have to make sure that everything's organized. I'm like, this is what a mom does. Like maintainers are the moms of open source projects, I think.
The moms of the internet is a maintainer. Absolutely. Parents, the ultimate maintainer. Yeah. We have a question from Tech in the Clouds. What about when you want to just give a heads up without going through the formalities sometimes associated with pull request issues, etc.? Yeah, our time's also valuable. Maybe we just want to give help how and where we can without the extra time-consuming formalities. And yeah, absolutely. That information is extremely valuable. Becca, what would you say?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different things. It depends on how the project is set up. I think at OpenSauced, most of our repositories have discussions, or we have org level discussions. And that can be a really simple way to say like, hey, I noticed this thing. Or hey, I would use your product if you had this feature. That's just like very low level. It's very conversational. The second way could be dropping in Discord. The third way, I would say like most of the times, writing an issue is a really great way to do it. Most of the time, an issue takes 5 minutes or less. It doesn't have to be super in-depth or complicated, especially if you don't have the time to do that. You can certainly write a very good issue where you hunt down the problem or the bug, but it doesn't always require that. Like, hey, I noticed this thing. Here's a screenshot. This is where I was when I saw it. And it's enough to give people more information to move forward. And so, those are 3 ways that you can communicate with maintainers. And, just because you write an issue doesn't mean that you have to work on that issue. There have been plenty of times where I have created issues that I do not have the technical capabilities to be able to solve those issues, but I want to put it out there so folks know and somebody can pick it up and work on it.
Yeah, and that's really the hard part is, well, how much effort do I have time to put into this? And I would say that, like you said, a 5-minute issue, even if it just says, here's what I noticed, here's a quick screenshot, I'm sorry I don't have more information right now, but this is just something I noticed. That can be really helpful in just at least getting the process started. And then maybe if you've got some time later on, you can come back and bring some more information. I had an issue with GitHub. I was in my my inbox that you have on there that lets you know when you've been tagged and stuff. And I noticed that some stuff was crowding. So I just made a video real quick, a screen video, said, hey, this is crowding over here. I'm not sure why. Here's the browser I'm on. Here's the machine I'm on. I'm sorry I don't have more info. But they were able to start working on it with just that much information. So even just letting someone know a little bit can be really helpful. Looks like the Dev Harsh is saying, considering our stack, if we got an eye on an awesome project but we're unable to contribute to code because it's built on a different stack, what other aspects can we look to contribute? So, this is a great project. It's not a stack I'm familiar with at all. What's a way that I can help with that?
Yeah, so one of the biggest challenges that maintainers run into, and this isn't going to get you a green square anywhere, but it's super valuable in building your network and your relationship with maintainers. It's talking about the project, sharing the project with other people, because maintainers are often responsible for marketing their project. If you go on Reddit, you can see so many people like, how do I get people to know more about my project? So talking about that project is huge. Sharing like, this is a really cool project. Like, I would love to be able to support it. Support it by sharing it with other people. And I think that's like a really good low level way. You can share it on social media. You can write a blog post about it. If you know how to run the project, you can do a demo of that project. But all of those things help build awareness, and it also helps to bring people to the project that do have those technical capabilities. So just because it's not in your stack doesn't mean that you can't do extremely valuable work for the maintainers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really like sometimes open source projects are just starved for someone to come in and do just a little bit, and that just a little bit can really kickstart a lot more people coming in and helping too. Tech in the Clouds had a follow-up, I believe, to how to help a little bit. Mature stacks have guidelines and templates that won't. A lot of mature stack projects have guidelines and templates. So, like, let's say you want to do something quick, they've got an issue form rather than just an issue template, and it's asking for a lot of information. You work with this open source company, you work with maintainers, you've been a maintainer. If you got that form up, that's you as a maintainer saying, this is kind of the minimum amount I need. And without this information, I can't do much. If I were a contributor and I saw a form like that and I didn't have time for the form, I would take another avenue. I think you said Discord, or like just posting a message somewhere, or even just something where you can message them and be like, I don't have time for an issue, but here's something I've noticed. Is that still valuable, Bekah?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that one of the things maybe to touch on here is there's a difference between open source and source open. And so there are certainly projects out there, but the people that work on those projects are employed by the company. And so they might have their code out there so everyone can work on it. But because of the situation, they're not really taking issues or pull requests or different types of ways of engaging with the project. So number one, it's okay to not spend a half an hour trying to figure out how to respond to them. The other thing is sometimes maintainers are just so overwhelmed that is the reason why they have that out there. Like, I cannot take comments unless it hits this threshold, because I'm just so overwhelmed with all of the stuff that I'm going to do. But if they do have a Discord, if they have a Slack or something like that, that can be a different way. Just like, hey, I know there's issues. I don't have time for it right now. This is the thing that I saw. Or is anybody else able to reproduce this bug? I saw it. I don't have time to write an issue. Does anyone else have time to write it? And I think that works too.
That's the one for sure. Hey, anybody else having this issue? Like, if you jump right to an issue and you're like, I don't have time for this, but you do have time to go, hey, is anyone else noticing this? And I guarantee either somewhere there has, or someone's going to go try it now. And if they encounter it, they may be like, oh, I can go make this issue. Like, I've seen it happen dozens of times. Oh, yeah, let me go make an issue for that. It's like, oh, cool, because I did not have time. Thank you. Ooh, Becca, that might be the most fire. If someone on Twitch clips that, that's a thing, especially me going bananas. That's the answer. That's the answer. That's a great clip to have for sure. Oh, my goodness. Another question from Dev Harsh. Should we reach out to the maintainers directly, or should we have a little talk with active contributors? I hesitate in asking I worry, I hesitate a little bit. So, like, maintainers directly, talk with active contributors. What's the best route there?
I think it's going to depend on the project, and most projects have a contributing guide. So definitely look over the contributing guide. That's like one of the main things I tell people. They're like, I don't know, I'm stuck. I'm like, did you read the contributing guide? They're like, well, I skimmed it. I'm like, okay, can you read it? And then let me know how that goes. Because, maintainers put together these things to empower you to be able to move forward. So read that README, read that contributing guide. Those are all super important, and that supports the maintainers because you're following directions. The next thing I would say is it kind of depends, because they might say like, yes, I love answering questions. I have office hours during this time, or just DM me. I would say in general, don't DM maintainers. That's usually really, really stressful, especially like if you're DMing them on weekends or in different time zones and stuff like that. I would join the community and kind of do a little bit of lurking, like we said. Does this make sense for me to share or to ask here? I personally would generally start by asking a community member questions, or like jumping in the community like, hey, I'm new to this project. This is the question I have. Can anyone point me in the right direction? I read the contributing guide, but I don't know if I should make an issue or if I should talk about it here first. And that's totally valid. That's a really great way to do it. If we go back to creating this contributor insight page that you can see up on the screen right now, look at who the contributors are. Hey, I know this person. I know B. Dougie, who's on here. I'm going to see if he's in the Discord, or if I can ask him this question. And then it gives you a little bit more insight, and then for the next time. So I'd say all it takes is that first question, and then you know what you should do next, or you have a general sense of that. The last thing I'll say is, if it's not clear how you should ask the question, then that might be a good time to create an issue and say, I read the contributing guide, I read the README, I'm not sure what to do. Can you clarify it in your contributing guide?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the kind of contributions that really help with the running of it. And I think a lot of people think of open source, well, I have to contribute code. And that's like, we're constantly fighting that battle with people. Like, it doesn't have to be code. Open source software is a tiny business. There's a lot to do to make sure it works and runs. You could contribute to a huge open source project and never touch the code and still have a lot of valuable contributions to it. And in fact, really large open source projects often have teams of people that work on specific things. And some of those teams never even touch the code base at all. They're working on other stuff to make sure things run effectively. And that's still a good way to meet people. Cassie Doo is here. Wild. Oh my goodness. Now I'm scared to say anything because I don't want to say something wrong, and there's an actual celebrity in the room. But yeah, it's more than just the code base. And if you go and you say the contribution guide feels a little thin on this part, what is your preference for that? Can I help build that out? Can I help write that for you? Here's an issue I've started. Here's a PR I started. Hey, I forked the project and I'm working on it over here. All of that's crazy valuable, like really, really, really valuable. But it is just that first question. And a great issue can be more valuable than a code contribution. Ooh, I can't believe we only have 3 minutes left on this stream, Becca. But we also have 2 episodes left on these streams.
That's right.
I feel like, yeah, we should start wrapping up. I feel bad. I feel like people are like going bananas in this chat right now. It's really great. Like hot fire. I'm loving this. Yeah. Adi, like most of my contributions are documentation and blog posts. Perfect. That's really good contributions. It's amazing. Becca, I am going to mess with Restream real quick here for a second. And I think I need to put an outro video here. And we're going to see if this actually works or not, because I just made an outro video for the stream while we were talking. And I think that's hilarious. And I wonder.
Well, Cassidy said we should go all day. So if it doesn't work, we can just continue to go.
I tell you what, a 24-hour stream seems like a really good idea, I think. And like, I can't imagine why that would be bad for my health, as I'm currently sick with COVID. That video did not download correctly.
I was going to say, I've had 2 cups of coffee and Adderall today. So like, I am on point. Don't clip that. Don't clip that.
Don't clip that. Do not have 2 cups of coffee and an Adderall at the same time, unless you're Becca and that's how you start every day. Do you start every day? I start every day like that too. Oh my goodness, this is fantastic. We do not have an outro video. We're going to use our intro video again as we leave. Oh good, the dance is up. This will not be the first time a dance of mine has gone viral. You'll have to crawl my Twitter to find the other dance. Becca, any last words before we head out? Any last links people need to know? Things they got to know, places they got to visit?
I would say if you do want a walkthrough, hit me up on Twitter at BekahHW everywhere. My DMs are open. I'm happy to give anybody a walkthrough of what we're working on. We'll be back, like PJ said, the next 2 Mondays at the same time. Super excited for that. If you have any questions for me in the meantime, again, hit me up. We've got lots of great content. And if there's something that you want to see, also let me know, because sometimes I feel like I'm writing the same thing over and over. And I want to answer the questions that people have.
That's right. You will be able to learn even more about Not-ternships, using open source as an internship, getting involved. The next 2 Mondays at 9 p.m. Pacific time, we're going to be right here. It's going to be Becca. It's going to be me. I won't have COVID next time, and I'll be a little more energetic. I know my energy's been super low today, y'all. I can tell.
So it's so low. It's been rough. I really held up this stream myself.
Tech in the Clouds, great question. After the 2 Mondays, when will you be back? We've already talked about making this a stream where these Mondays are something where we're talking to somebody from the Student Developer Pack. Students out there, if you don't have the Student Developer Pack, get it, but keep tuned to this channel. What do they say? Am I a YouTuber now? Like, subscribe, hit the bell. No, that's YouTube.
Mash that button.
Mash the follow button at the very least. Don't need to subscribe. We're not looking to make money on these streams, but like follow us to be alerted about when we get on there. Get the Student Developer Pack, y'all. Join us next week with Becca from OpenSauced. Becca, thank you so much for coming. Watch our intro video again, and we'll see y'all next time.
Thanks.
Bye.